Nothing. Just here for fun. I know. And everything else to do tonight.
Yeah. You should have to give her a
And the agenda.
Nice. Yeah.
Actually, two of mine are going to be blue. All of them are.
We should all this.
This week was
The terrorist
might as well be a planning zoning and variance.
I know.
Hey, Mr. Bernardo.
Boy, this is good. And all of that is like
But the partnership now, the actual entity. The partnership. But we're actually going cover up on that topic.
I wish we had done Is one over? Yeah.
Thanks for asking, sir.
Very.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's work session. We have a couple of items on here. Item one is presentation of vulnerability index, survey findings by Mr. Gary Sanford. So you want to come forward and give us your presentation?
Absolutely. Thank you for making time for us to be here today. My name is Gary Sanford, and I'm with the Burns Center on Poverty and Homelessness, associated with the Graduate School of Social Work at the University of Denver. With me is Cullen Dildine, standing up here, Dildine, sorry, and then Katie Simons, who will have come up in a few minutes to speak to you as well. She's representing LeBeau Development, who has the housing development expertise. So the PowerPoints, I'll kind of go through the slides. And you all have a paper copy, and I think an electronic copy of the final report that was sent to you. So happy to kind of give you some high-level information about the report and then answer any questions. So the Burns Center is really focused on doing research and evaluation as it relates to poverty and homelessness. Been in existence around 3 years. And so our work around the state, really largely Denver metro area. And so we're real pleased to have been able to work with folks here in Trinidad and be helpful in collecting information for you all.
Your presentation is about how long may I ask? We have a second item on there, and that's
So we can keep this to like 20 minutes. Is that
30 minutes?
30 minutes is perfect. Okay.
30 minutes.
Okay. Great. So I'm going to have Katie come up and talk about the timeline as LeBeau Development was engaged with you all sooner than we were.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Nice to see you again, councilors. I know I've had the chance to meet some of you, but not all, so it's nice to be here again, and thank you for having us tonight. My name is Katie Simons. I'm with LeBeau Development, and I just kind of wanted to spend just a brief moment to talk about kind of how we got here and recap a little bit about the last year to give folks in the audience maybe who aren't familiar with the effort an idea of why we're here and what brought us here. So the timeline kind of shows dating back to October of last year in 2017. There was a team from Trinidad that included Mr. Carlos Lopez and Greg Suggs, as well as Mallory Pillard from the library, who came together to attend a permanent supported housing toolkit which is a state-sponsored toolkit that brings teams from all around Colorado together for a 5-month-long training and technical assistance series. Folks who want to address homelessness and look at housing development in their communities. So they, survived. They graduated from the toolkit. It was a great experience, I think. In December 17, we came down here for the first time and held our first community meeting at the rec center. It was a great opportunity to kind of get to know the community a little bit and talk about what we were doing. In January, the team graduated from the toolkit, and at that point, they actually met Gary from the Burn Center, had some discussion around what the needs were in Trinidad, and I think the need and the finding from the toolkit was, this all sounds great, but we don't even have the data identified from our community to really know who it is that we would be serving and who are the most vulnerable in our community, what types of services do they need. So that's where in May of 18, the Burn Center came in. The team and you all I know had decided it would be a good idea to move forward with trying to collect some data and get a much better sense about the picture of homelessness here in this community and what some potential solutions to homelessness and people who are lacking housing stability might be. So in April we came down here, I came down with my colleagues at Zoe Lowe. We talked, I think, with you all for about an hour and a half just around support housing and what that model is.
Can we turn on the microphone?
Oh,
before we
sure.
continue? There's
Sorry,
nobody
Molly.
can hear in the back. No, I'm just going to grab Monica real
Apologies.
quick, or somebody else.
Or maybe it's on and I just need to speak into it.
It's on, Mallory.
Okay.
You have to lean
Sorry
into
about
it.
that. I'll lean in and try to be a little bit more cognizant of where I'm speaking.
Can you move your computer and draw it closer to you?
Yes. Let's see.
Just a suggestion.
Okay. We'll try that. Okay, so anyway, that took us then to June this summer, and I'm going to have Gary explain what happened during that week-long effort where he and some folks from his team actually surveyed a number of individuals in Trinidad with this vulnerability index to try to get a better sense of who folks are in this community, what their experiences are with housing and homelessness, and that brings us to today when we are back to talk about the findings. So just as a very quick recap before Gary gets into the survey findings, when we talk about this model, which we call permanent supportive housing, or PSH, I just kind of want to talk about what the 3 main criteria or elements of that type of housing model is. When we say permanent, I know that sometimes turns people off, but I would prefer to use the term kind of non-time limited, if you will. But I want to make the distinction that this type of housing falls under a housing first model, and it's not transitional housing, it's not a group home, it's not congregate living. It actually is apartments where people hold leases, pay rent, and live as independently as possible. I say as independently as possible because we do know that a lot of the folks who may benefit from this type of housing may have a high need for supportive services. And supportive services can look like anything from, next slide, anything from help with job searches and employment, getting access to benefits that they may be eligible for, connecting with mental health, behavioral health, or substance use disorder providers, mentoring, financial budgeting, literacy, anything that kind of falls into the realm of case management that is going to help somebody live more self-sufficiently. I'll go back one time just to this affordable piece as well. People are expected to pay rent when they live in this type of housing. But because we know that the folks that this type of housing targets are the extremely low income, generally people who are making at or below 30% of AMI, the expectation is that there is an operating subsidy or a voucher that helps to subsidize the rent. People will pay no more than 30% of their income towards that rent, and then the voucher will subsidize the rest. Again, I mentioned services, very targeted. So again, based on the population, whether you're serving veterans or youth or seniors, those services would be targeted towards the population. They're flexible. We want them to be client-driven, which means it's not a mandatory condition to the housing that folks have to be med compliant or be involved in a treatment program in order to get that or maintain that housing. It's very flexible and it's voluntary. Participation, again, of any kind is not a condition to residency. And again, it's independent. It's focused on housing stability. The goal of this type of housing is to get people housed and to keep people housed. So that's permanent supportive housing in a nutshell. With that said, I will now turn it back over to Gary, who can talk a little bit about who in this community may be a good candidate for this type of housing.
All right. Thanks, Katie. Sure. All right. So just a couple, there's a lot of information in the report, and so I'm not going to be able to cover all the information in the report, but the PowerPoint will give you highlights of what's in the report and some key findings. So basically, the survey process Outreach was conducted in advance, so folks knew where we would be doing the surveying. Volunteers were trained in addition to 4 students that I brought down from DU to do the survey. We actually talked with 63 individuals, so we actually got 63 surveys over the June 13th to the 14th time frame. There were a number of refusals by potential survey participants, folks who didn't want to participate. So to not think that the 63 is all of the folks out there, it certainly is not. But those are the 63 that we were able to get to participate in the survey. We used an instrument called the Vulnerability Index, and the report talks quite a bit about this tool. It was developed by a medical team in Boston, looking at the likelihood of individuals dying on the streets because of homelessness, exposure, and other related issues. This tool really captures a lot of information around mental health, substance use, physical health, as well as other demographic information and history of homelessness and housing. The information we gathered was all self-reported, okay, so it's important to know that. And we see across the country when these types of surveys are used with this population, it's often underreported. So what I mean by that is folks who have been treated for mental health issues may not always admit that they have been treated for mental health issues. So we find that what we do get is an underreport, but it's still some significant numbers that you'll see in some of the findings. The last piece here is that we used valid percentages, which means if we had missing answers or refusals, they weren't included. So out of 63 and 3 refused, then we looked at those 60 and what percent of the 60 responded to this question. Okay. So some key findings, and you'll see that there's some references in the PowerPoint to pages and figures, but I want to just kind of point out some high-level key findings that came out of this survey. So over 30% reported living in Los Animas County for more than 10 years, while 8.6% reported living in the county between 6 and 10 years, which really translates to almost 40% of the interviewees have lived in the county for more than 6 years. Over 40% reported income from work, some under the table, some over the table, but working. Almost 20% have been homeless more than 6 years. 1/3 of the interviewees reported they have a permanent physical disability that limits their mobility, and 1/4 reported having had a serious brain injury or head trauma that required medical attention. Other key findings, a majority of the interviewees, 56.5%, reported they have received treatment for mental health issues. A majority of the interviewees, again, 56.5, reported they've received, oh, sorry, that's a duplicate. 3/4 reported they've been in jail. And over 2/3 reported they've abused alcohol or drugs. Okay. You have actually in the report, and folks in the audience have an infographic sheet, which just really provides kind of high-level overview. And you'll see in your paper report, the infographic is on page 11 and 12. And so what I'll do is just quickly highlight, but you can find the education levels that were reported, ethnicity that was reported, as well as age and gender. So almost 40% of the interviewees identified as female, and with a little over 60% male. And then you see the age breakdown. I think the over 50 years old, a little bit over 35% were over 50. And we had a few folks under 25. Okay.
What page are you on?
So these are just snapshots out of that. Yeah. So if you look, we just pulled out some of the pieces of the infographic. So maybe on the back side.
Okay, it doesn't
Yeah. Total time spent in homelessness. So we see that over 50% have been homeless 1 to 5 years, 8% 6 to 10 years, and 11% more than 10 years. How long have they been in Los Animas County? About 1/3 of the folks reported more than 10 years they've been in Los Animas County. Another 8% plus reported 6 to 10, and then about 34% reported less than a year in Los Animas County. Where they slept most frequently versus last night. And this chart is a little creative. So the left side of the chart talks about where they slept most frequently and the numbers. The right side where they slept last night. We have typically, when we've done this kind of assessment, people report that they're in housing. We have a number of questions in the survey trying to get to that or to the homelessness. So we had a number of people reported, 11 people reported being in some sort of rental housing when asked where they slept last night. 6 people reported sleeping most frequently in housing, and then 10 people reported living with family most frequently. And I can tell you an example of a young man that I interviewed who has been in and out of homelessness, currently living with family, but it was very tentative. And so what we see sometimes where folks talk about, well, I'm housed, yeah, I have a camper over there that I live in, or I have a tent over at the campground that I live in. And so often that housing notion for some of these folks is not necessarily permanent. It could be very temporary and not necessarily stable. But again, we don't have all the details on that, but that's typically what we see. Reasons for homelessness, and this goes from the highest response, people could respond to more than one reason. Unable to pay rent was over half of the folks said that was an issue. And then going down the list in the order of responses, loss of a job. And then relationship problems. We've seen a lot of communities, that's not something community often sees as an issue, but relationship, family breakup, domestic violence is a real factor in homelessness for certain people within the population. Bad credit is next. You'll see domestic violence, 29%. And then so forth. Moved to find work, asked to leave, problems with benefits, drug usage, and addiction history. So these are the top 10 reasons that were identified by the interviewees for the reasons they're homeless. Health histories. Ironically, and we looked at this this number over and over and over, and Colin has dug into the data, and so we know that of the respondents, they reported 100 ER visits in the last 3 months. So 100 visits to the emergency room in the last 3 months. They also reported 100 hospitalizations in the last year. We don't know locality of this. The assumption would be, because folks have been here a while, that this would have occurred in this county or in this community, these hospitalizations and ER visits. Interestingly, we know that also 65% are on Medicaid and 19% are on Medicare, with not, an individual who has private insurance. Okay, there is a percent that you'll see in the report. I think about 25%, Colin, that had no insurance of the whole interview group. The interviews reported regarding some health histories. Again, the permanent disability over 33%, brain injury we talked about, mental health issues we talked about in the highlights, and then also a victim of a violent attack, a little bit over 39% reported.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
On the emergency room visits or even hospitalizations in the last month and last 3 months. It shows nothing here about maybe overdoses for drug use. Did you get any data on that?
We didn't ask the reasons for hospitalization, so we have on the next slide a lot of the health conditions that may have been a driver, but that's not something that we asked. So that would certainly be an interesting piece of information. It would be interesting also with your hospitals to know what are they seeing when folks are coming in. The next slide really points out some of these folks had some pretty significant issues. Heat stroke, 25% reporting that. 25% reporting asthma, that they have asthma. 20% diabetes, almost 16% heart disease, and then the others, 9+% cancer, frostbite, emphysema, and hepatitis C. So we often see in communities where there are individuals experiencing long-term homelessness that there are some pretty significant health issues. And the vulnerability index really was about looking at length of homelessness, health issues, as well as use of substances and mental health issues. So again, looking at folks with some of these issues considered highly vulnerable for dying on the streets. You'll find in the back of the report, and I give Colin total credit for all of this, that we took several data points and we tried to look at the intersection of these data points and what is it telling us. So, Colin, you might have to back me up on some of this if I'm misspeaking. So this one that I'm going to talk about here on the PowerPoint, emergency room visits over the last 3 months, cross-analyzed with time in Los Animas County. So you'll see the chart there, 62 of the 100 emergency room visits involved persons who've been homeless, who've been in Los Animas County more than 10 years. So 62 of those folks. Going down less than a year, 20 of those folks reported. Yeah, or 20 episodes.
Yeah, those are visits. So like for 62 on more than 10 years,
Yeah.
that is 62 reported visits, not people.
Yeah.
Reported visits.
62 visits by those individuals who have been in Los Angeles County more than 10 years. And so you'll see on the left, we've got a little bit more detail, but for those 10 years, those individuals reporting 62%, and obviously those individuals will be a smaller number that we can talk about. There's another analysis on jail, cross-analyzed with time in Los Angeles County. So again, individuals who reported more than 10 years, these are 16 individuals have been in Los Angeles County who, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, 'cause those-
Jail time.
That's people.
And then 24.5% reported having lived in the county 1 to 5 years. So 12 of those individuals reported jail time, correct, Colin? Yep. And then 16 individuals who've been here less than a year reported jail time. We often see in communities where folks are reporting jail time, these aren't typically person-related crimes. They are typically misdemeanor, lower-level crimes, trespassing, public intoxication, public urination, some of those kinds of things. We don't typically see really person-related crimes. The next analysis is individuals reporting jail, broken down by reported mental health treatment. So of the 48 individuals who reported having been in jail, 27 of them reported also having received treatment for mental health in their lifetime. The next one, reported mental health treatment, broken down by reported drug and alcohol abuse. Of the 41 individuals who reported having a history of drug and alcohol abuse, 25 of them, a little over 60%, also reported having a history of mental health treatment. Individuals reporting jail broken down by drug and alcohol abuse. Of the 48 individuals who reported being in jail, 35 of them, or 71+%, also identified as having a history of drug and alcohol abuse. For people who reported having experienced homelessness for 2 years or more in their life, that's a little bit over, almost 62% of these individuals reported having a permanent physical disability. We also have reported experience of domestic violence broken down by gender. 13 identified as women, while the other 4 identified as men. And one person who reported domestic violence declined to identify their gender. Hospitalizations broken down by health insurance. Of the 100 reported hospitalizations over the past year, 63% of those visits were made by individuals who reported having health insurance. 37% of the reported hospitalizations over the last year were made by people who reported having no health insurance. So some of this information is about system impact, whether it's your healthcare system, whether it's your jails. Looking at individuals who don't have health insurance really causes a problem for the healthcare providers, because uncompensated care really can add up quite a bit depending on individuals and their coverage. High level, again, this is basically the high level information that we wanted to provide. We've got some other comments that Katie would like to make, and I don't know if we want to get into questions and answers before that, or just have Katie present and then we can be open up for questions.
I'm going to have her present.
Yeah.
Questions.
All right. So I know that we are not really prepared to talk about, specific next steps at this point, but I just wanted to kind of throw it out there to see at this point, now that you've had some of the data, and I know it'll take a little bit of time to kind of digest most of the report and the information that is in there, but just kind of wanted to also note that we have been talking with a development partner who, has been down to visit Trinidad and has spoken with Carlos and Greg and Mallory, and has taken a look at a couple of sites, primarily the school on East Street, and has had some conversations about the potential of doing a rehab on that facility. So I know that we had talked about, if this is something that this community wants to move forward with, would it be a new build or would it be a rehab of an existing site to create more new affordable housing? And I think the latter was the ideal option, given the fact that this is a community that has a lot of buildings that, obviously where historic preservation is a top priority, and it doesn't really make sense to come in and do new construction when there might be a facility that is vacant, that could be rehabbed. So we've had some high-level discussions with a development partner. He's with an organization called Ethos Development. He's done a lot of permanent supportive housing projects in Colorado, New Mexico, and in Michigan. And at that point, you know, we would need to do a further market study on that site. We need to do an analysis of the land and kind of talk about whether or not this was something that that this community was ready to kind of look at and move forward with. So I know last time we spoke, we talked a bit about financing models and the availability of resources at the state level. Those resources are still available. We've now gone through a 2018 low-income housing tax credit round. The next round for low-income housing tax credits to apply for those funding sources is in 2019. And so there's some different options for that, as well as different options for looking at the operating subsidies, which would be the project-based vouchers that are offered through the State Department or Division of Housing, Department of Local Affairs. So there would be some funding rounds that would be coming available as early as February in 2019 to look at resources that would actually be available to this community to look at building or rehabbing some type of a structure that could then house individuals that are in need of this type of housing. So that's kind of where we are high level. Still a lot of analysis and conversations needing to be had around that specific site. If it's something that works, if it's something that this community is interested in moving forward with, we're certainly with Willow Development happy to continue supporting the community and the team. Just as a little bit of a background, we do work with Division of Housing in Chapa to support teams that came out of the toolkit that after they've graduated need additional technical assistance to really move that project concept forward through the whole application process and through to implementation. And so that is something that Zoe and I are still under contract with Chapa and DOH to do, and very excited to continue working with this community if that is in fact something that you all decide you want to move forward on.
Well, I think what's going to happen is just going to have to entail a little more conversation on our side to see what kind of support we'll give this at this point in time. But right now, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I do. This is the first attempt to quantify and define and qualify. I don't want to use the word problem, our situation, okay? And Trinidad has few employment opportunities for persons who are looking for day work or that sort of thing, or lesser paying jobs. We have few service providing agencies in terms of mental health and medical care and that sort of thing, as compared to Denver. Right. So where I'm painfully trying to go, from your experience and from this data, how does the proportion of our situation compare with what your experience is Denver might have, or Fort Collins, or Montrose, or Grand Junction? Are we commensurate with what's happening in the state, or does our proximity to a state line cause things to be
It's
different?
it's hard to say exactly what brings people in who weren't necessarily from here, but I will say that it was very surprising to see the numbers of the outdoor community here that we encountered when we did the survey. We didn't expect to see the numbers we did. And I think historically, there's a count done every year called point in time. And many communities have a very difficult time assessing the level of homelessness, and I think previous point in time reports for the city have been maybe 24 or so, and so we didn't expect to see the numbers that we saw. Now obviously being here in the summer probably looks different than it does when point in time is conducted in January, right? But I will say it was surprising to see the numbers, and the other thing I would say to you all is, as a community, you're entitled to some resources to address this issue. This isn't an issue that necessarily has to be resourced exclusively by the city or the county. There are resources to help you do this. Yeah, state resources, federal resources, and what I would say to you, you're not getting your fair share of what's out there. And so housing, as well as other types of funding to kind of prevent homelessness, is available through the state and the federal government. And so that would be, I would want to put that on the table for you as well, because I think that was striking for us too, to not see the services as being available.
Okay, and I have one other question. When the discussion first began a year or so ago, and through your efforts about having this discussion around the citizens and community that feel the dream, build it so they come. And by attempting to provide services, we're going to make our problem worse. We're going to have more people come. speak to that if you will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that perception, and I think in some cases that might occur. But what I also see in a lot of communities is they've got several levels of intervention. So if you've got someone coming into the community who's not from the community, getting information about where are you headed, why are you here, what are you looking for. I used to run a large organization in Denver that funded programs around homelessness, and we would get phone calls around the country. We want to come to Colorado. We hear there's lots of opportunity. And we would say, don't come. There's no housing. There's not enough shelter beds. This is not a place that you should be coming because you're not going to probably get the resources you think you might. So when you've got the several levels of intervention, some communities are even looking at how do we redirect some of these folks. So do you have family living in New Mexico? Is that a place you can go? How do we help you get back down there? How do we look at, for example, veterans? There are a number of resources for veterans. Maybe going up into Pueblo and tapping into those veteran resources makes better sense than a veteran being housed down here and struggling, particularly with health issues. So there's a number of ways to kind of slice and dice, if you would, some of the approaches and how to segment populations according to services. The housing part that Katie is speaking to really is largely for the most vulnerable. And what I would say, and Katie has some slides with some information about other cities that have learned, boy, the cost on our jails, the cost of police time, the cost of our emergency personnel, and the cost of hospitalization. For some communities, that's a lot more expensive than housing and serving these folks who are really in need. And some of these cities that Katie can talk about in a minute, they've really seen, wow, if we continue down this path and high system utilization, that really costs us quite a bit, and it's taking law enforcement and emergency personnel away from what they should be doing. We see that when people are housed, who really are vulnerable, mental health issues, substance use, when they're housed, that system impact goes down dramatically. They don't see the jail time.
Let's go ahead, we have to move on to
Thank
the
you.
next question.
Yes.
Unless somebody has any real questions that you have that you want to answer.
I just have one quick question. So you just approached, you got 63 people to do the survey. Of the 63 people that completed this survey, did you quantify or qualify that they were homeless, or they're all homeless?
Well, no, we asked them about their homeless status, and that's what I was saying earlier. We had about 10 of them say, oh no, I'm housed. We're saying, well, it's interesting, we're encountering you whether it's the soup kitchen or some other settings where other homeless folks are gathering. And that was my comment earlier about, there's some folks that we interviewed who reported they were housed, I would guess probably temporary or not real stable, and they've been in and out of homelessness.
But the stats are conflicting, because the biggest percentage of people in your survey have lived here from 6 to 10 years. They have health insurance. To me, they have a job. To me, that doesn't define homelessness, and I'm sure your definition is far better than mine, but it doesn't seem like it's...
Well, these are people sleeping outside, so maybe some of those folks housed, but we had other people report working, and we find in communities when we look at homelessness, there is a significant percent who are working, but they're not housed necessarily. They may be sleeping in a shelter, and I suspect here they're sleeping outside, or they're couch surfing, as we see, jumping around from home to home.
You know what we might do is, might have to bring you back, because I think this is something that I think that we need to discuss a little bit more in depth, and more
absolutely.
questions from council.
Real short.
And I want to walk through this report real quick, just to outline it for you, and then we'll finish up. Yes, ma'am.
What percentage of the cost would be borne by people other than the city?
So that would be something we could do a little bit more of a deeper dive into
But
the
just an
data.
estimate, is it 90, 50, 30?
The cost to do a housing intervention, or are you talking about specifically the cost that these 63 individuals currently are costing the city?
No, I'm talking about the finances it would
Yeah.
take to develop this hub.
How much would the city pay for a permanent supportive
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is it depends on the city. So,
But you've studied Trinidad, so what
Sure.
would it be for Trinidad?
well, it would depend on how much money you could get from these other federal and state resources, and then you would have to see what the gap is. Generally speaking, with tax credits, that is going to pay for about 70% of the capital of the development of a building, whether that's new construction or rehab. You then have vouchers that are going to subsidize rents, right, at about, depending on what your fair market rent is and depending on how many vouchers they are, you look at your fair market rent, it's going to subsidize 0 to 100% until that person can pay 30% of their income towards the rent. Then you're going to look for other gap funding. That might come from the state, the Department of Local Affairs. It might come from, if you're an entitlement community and you have any access to CDBG or home funds, that type of thing, those are other areas that you would go to for gap financing. There's also Federal Home Loan Bank and other sources of
What
funding.
about operating expenses? What
So
percentage?
the operating expenses should be self-sustaining, as should the services in a building like this, the way that it is set up. Because you actually have a capitalized service budget, which takes part of the cash flow from the operations or from the vouchers, and it puts it into a service
Okay, I
agreement.
think I need to look at
Okay,
it.
sorry, I'm probably making it a little too
No, you
technical.
did a great job.
But to your
That's fine.
point, these projects are set up to not actually bring a large burden of cost to local communities. If done well, I will say this, there are state resources available right now that have not been available for this kind of supported housing in the past. And we do not know how long they are going to last based on our current administration and what's happening at the federal level. But I will say currently we have an opportunity through the Division of Housing, as well as through CHAPA, to tap into some state and federal resources in a way that almost make these projects no debt at the end of the compliance period, if it is a tax credit project, and self-sustaining based on the way that they're set up with the operating reserve and the services reserve.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on, because we have this other line item that we have to finish up on. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We might have to bring you back.
I'm happy to come back and answer questions, so please let us know. And there's a lot of details in this report, a lot of information, so much more than I gave you guys.
And to your comment, Mr. Matei, we have a problem when we don't have a facility. It's not because we're inviting them right now. There's some.
It's a point made.
Just rejecting my ally.
Okay, item number 2 is Space Create Trinidad Project Review and Updates.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. Tara Marshall, the Development Services Director. I'm here this evening with some incomparable friends from ArtSpace. We have Andrew Michelson, we have Lucas Koski, and Will Law. So we're here tonight in this particular agenda item to do a quick update, and then I'm going to do a review, and then Andrew's going to provide an update on the project. So in your council packets, I thought it was kind of neat to do a timeline for the project. So if you go back to the very beginning, which was July of 2015, only 3 of you that sit on council now were actually here. We had 9 council members and 2 mayors be a part of this project. On July 28th of 2015, Governor Hickenlooper announced the initiative and selected Trinidad as the demonstration project. ArtSpace came in September. We had 230 members of the community participate in the feasibility study. International Bank donated the building on December 1, 2015, the Franck building, our very first contribution to the project. In January 12th, the Arts Market survey was done. 616 folks responded. 162 of them said they would come to Trinidad. February 19th, the city purchased the Toller and Aiello buildings to create the very first campus, which was an entire block in the downtown. The project was defined at that time as 20 living spaces and 10,000 square feet of community space. As you know, we were not successful with CHAPA in that year, so we came back in March. We rededicated ourselves. We met with ArtSpace. They suggested expanding the project. It was expanded to include an Elm Street campus. It's now 41 units, 20,000 square feet of community space. So when other councils or communities would have said, well, we don't have a funded project, let's do something smaller, we said, we don't have a funded project, let's just double it and let's go be successful. And that's exactly what we were. So we received the CHAPA. The presentation was made in August of 2017. In September 1, Andrew got the letter that we received the tax credits, $1,147,895 in tax credits over 10 years, every year for 10 years. And October 12th, the mayor said, let's have a party, and we did. We had about 200 folks come out and celebrate that. Now, from January to September, it seemed quiet, but we've been closing. We've been securing the final tax credits. We've been negotiating, ArtSpace has been negotiating with RBC, our partners, Citibank came on board to provide the construction financing. Gibbs Construction out of New Orleans has been selected as the contractor. The zoning was done on Elm Street, and we're doing the minor subdivision now on Main Street, as well as legal review of all the documents. And of course, on June 11th, we had our groundbreaking. So right now, as of the 1st of September, the total development for construction and rehabilitation of both sites are estimated to be $18,656,032. We've already expended in pre-development $925,000 for total project costs of just over $19.5 million on the project. Of the $19.5 million, the city has committed to the construction, the pre-development costs we've already expended, the market survey, the acquisition of building, and other ancillary costs bring the city's total to $1,825,000 is the anticipated.
Can you say that number one time?
$1,825,000 expended on both pre-development and construction. So I want to make 2 points. One is that for a little bit less than $2, this project has brought $17. For a little bit less than $2, this project has brought $17 additional dollars to the community. That's one. Second, when you look at pre-development costs, generally you can see pre-development costs of a project like this could be somewhere between 6 to 8, maybe even 9%. ArtSpace did the pre-development on this project for 3% of the total value of the overall project. That's really unheard of to see pre-development costs that low. I think that goes to the excellence in the partner that the state suggested that they chose and that has worked with us through so many of the potential times when we could have said this isn't going to work, and yet we made it work. So I just wanted to kind of read into the record a summary of what the states, when we look at City Council and the commitment that they've made, the partners, the state, the staff, the community. I think what I'd like to just read into the record kind of the way we view you and your commitment. We were asked to develop a project that was both a catalyst for statewide and for local investment, and a project that would be a transformational project for our community. City Council made this possible. When Trinidad was asked, you stepped up, all of you, all 11 of you, those of you here and those that were here before, you took the risk, and through those actions, you're leading the way, not just for Trinidad, but for the state in this initiative. As a result, this project will serve our community and will be an example of rural development throughout Colorado and the nation. So thank you for your commitment to the project. That's the review I wanted to provide. Andrew's going to provide the updates. Do you have any questions on that? It's impressive when you look at it.
Thank you.
4 years. Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having me back. My name is Andrew Michelson. I'm with ArtSpace Projects, and I'm the project lead developing the Space Trivia project here in Trinidad. So Tara had provided, before this meeting, this outline, but I hadn't really looked at it in detail. So I was actually just sort of reminiscing, as she's going through, how much, truly time and effort has been expended on this project. And I had forgotten, in fact, that we got the Chaffa letter on my birthday. So that, I remember getting the letter. I don't remember that was my birthday. So that, I think, sort of exemplifies the importance of that day. And Tara really did, I think, a good job of summarizing, where we've been between 2015 and now. And I also recall, Mr. Mayor, when we did have that celebration in the street, we were making some public address. I said, no, don't be concerned. Things are going to go quiet for a while. You're not going to see a lot of activity, and that has been the case. We've been doing a lot of that behind-the-scenes work as far as soliciting investment. And there have been a few things that have sort of been bumps in the road as well. I think most notably is when tax reform went through, there's pretty significant disruption to the tax credit market. That has settled down. We've persevered. We have committed investment letter of intent from RBC Capital Markets. Our funding is secure for the project, but we do have a couple of hurdles in front of us yet. So as we're marching forward towards closing, we're hoping to be in a position to start construction yet this year, hopefully by October or early November. And what we're working through right now is most recently having completed construction documents. We're in for permit and for planning review, et cetera. As Tara mentioned, we're coming in for the condominiumization approval. We also went out to bid, and we've seen pretty significant cost increases from what was budgeted even 6 months ago. And it's really, I think, testimony to the amount of work that's available, frankly, in the Denver region, even as far down south as Springs and Pueblo. We are really seeing difficulty getting contractors responding to bid on work, and then the numbers they're bringing are, frankly, incredibly high. So right now we're dealing with a cost increase and some struggles in front of us as far as what we need to do to get that dollar down, as well as identify new sources to ensure that we have a balanced budget to go forward. We'll close with a balanced budget, and we'll have our appropriate contingencies in our planning to go forward. Underwriting remains, realistic but conservative, so we know we have a good, viable operational project once we open those doors, about a year's worth of construction. So just to quantify things, and I don't say this number to be shocking, but we're looking at about a $2 million increase off of budgeted costs. So we're working through that. I'm confident we'll be able to get that number down. We're really beating the bushes with trying to find subcontractors, both regionally and frankly looking outstate and bringing folks in. It's more cost effective to do that. So that's where we are right now.
I was just wondering, you're talking about the prices going up and up and up. This brings me back to some flashbacks about the Lamar power plant with ARPA, that we're going to build this power plant which is only going to cost us this much. Well, 1 year later, it went up this much, and another year later, it went up this much. So what I'm trying to tell you or ask you is that I don't want to sit here and listen and say, well, these costs are going up and going up and going up, and nothing being done. I mean, we have to get on the ball and on the stick. So, I'm not gonna, it's hard to say we're gonna wait a year or 6 months or 8 months, and by that time it's going up some more money. So that's kind of a flashback that I'm having here, and I hope it's not a flashback they're doing.
Yeah. Can I, since
Sure.
Andrew
Yeah.
doesn't know what happened,
Oh,
more
okay.
recorded
Well, yeah.
Now I can venture a guess and
Yeah.
tell you that while I share your concern about filling gaps, I mean, as Andrew said, the idea is that we're moving forward with a balanced budget. But the thing is, the reason we know about this $2 million is we're looking for firm construction bids with, scope changes and so forth. But Lamar, they just walked into it. It was cost plus. I mean, you wouldn't do cost plus in your
No,
home,
sure, I know.
and they did it on the
The
power.
point is that I just don't want to see
Yeah,
it go down the road.
it's a much more structured environment. And I do share your concerns about rising costs, but I trust the gap's going to be plugged.
Okay.
Councilman Bernardo, I think your point is a good one, and it's one we're very sensitive to. And as Michelle Miles points out, we will be entering into a contract, both with the general contractor and all subs, with a committed price for the scope of work as drawn and committed to with a timeline attached to that. The issue that we're having is either A, subs who are unwilling to bid on the work for whatever reason, they're just too busy or not interested in coming south, frankly, to Trinidad, or the numbers that we are getting are, to quote my contractor, ridiculously high for what you would expect. And it's labor and it's materials. And some of it's on par and others are not, and it's really trying to thread that needle, getting numbers we know are right and getting numbers that are reliable, but also that have been budgeted. And so we're working both on the cost side to try and get that down, and also to increase sources where we can. So we'll continue to work that. I completely agree that every day that we are not on the ground is a day that costs could go up, interest rates could go up. All of those are sensitivities that we're trying to work through. I'm not here to send sunshine in everyone's direction and say that it's not a struggle, but I will also say that we've been down this road before. Projects have cost issues, and we achieve a balanced budget, and we close on that balanced budget, and that's what our intent is to do here. I will look forward to coming back and giving you the update that we are broken ground and solve that issue. But it's one we're sensitive to, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any further comments at this time? I know we've got a few other items, but
Is there ever any chances where you may, like we were informed that groundbreaking was going to start in September, now you're telling us it's going to be pushed back to October, November. Is there another chance that this may be told to us again, that it may be December or January? I mean, is that a feasible
it's a
reality?
possibility. It's really not something that I would wager a guess on today. I will tell you that we're advancing with all of our funding partners as far as negotiating partnership agreement, bank loan documents. We've worked with RBC and Citibank a number of times. We're pretty well down the road as far as understanding those structures. It's how do we solve now this construction issue. So once we have that dollar figure, all the other pieces are in place. So assuming we can get those numbers fixed, I think end of October is realistic. Until we got those bids back as high as they were, we were anticipating first part of October. So we've got some time to work that through. But I won't be hesitant to come back and tell you if the truth bears out in a different way and it's looking November, I'll be truthful. I'll tell you that it's going to be November. I would hate to tell you it's going to be October 31st and then everyone have a Halloween party and it's not on that date. I just don't know that at this time. But, we're very open book. I communicate with Tara, sometimes daily, but certainly weekly about exactly where we are and all of that. Our funding sources remain committed, and again, I just want to stress it's a construction issue for us at this point.
Andrew, is the 2 million over budget for just the Main Street and or just the elm or both?
It's a total project. So when we're talking
For
about
both.
it's really a comprehensive project budget. It includes the new construction on the elm as well as all rehab on Main Street. So it's a total project budget. It's one construction contract, one scope of work, different plans and how they're divided up ultimately, but it's one project.
That's kind of good news. In a weird way.
Any further questions?
Any other questions?
I would expect it to be later and more expensive. I mean, that's just the way I'm not saying anything negative, I'm just saying that's the way I
That's
approach
the way you
things. But you've got the most resourceful people I've met in a long time.
And there's 30 for 30.
I
Right?
know,
30
right?
projects your organization's performed already?
We have 50 projects operating, but they weren't all tax credits, so we'll just go 30 for 30, sure. Anything else?
Okay, that's it.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you. Anything else, Tara?
No, thank you. We have several items on the agenda tonight, and we're going to address the next one, which is the ownership structure and what that will look like in the policy items in the regular meeting. Do you have any other questions about updates on the project or just a general review? Okay, we're getting really close.
There we are.
We are. Thank you.
Bill,
Okay,
Mayor, can I take a few minutes?
sure.
Since we've got about 10 minutes in between here. I wish the people were still here that were talking about homeless. I want to read to you something that happened about 24 hours ago, a couple blocks from here. The person that wrote this is maybe 5 foot tall and maybe 100 pounds, if that. I just didn't think it would be appropriate to step in at that time, so it'll take about 2 to 3 minutes to read this. What happened was supposed to be fun. Amazing Yoginos trip to our local family park. Yoginos are little children. Today turned into a traumatic, intense, frightening experience. Sophia said she felt like she was in a horror movie. Look at how happy they were before their deal. There was a bunch of pictures of the little kids over playing the piano at the park. We were having a jolly time creating yoga poses with chalk, practicing the poses, and playing on the piano. We decided to walk towards the playground and the river. So I loaded up the toddlers in a wagon, and we headed that way. I had a 9-year-old girl, a 6-year-old boy, a 4-year-old boy, and my 3-year-old daughter Avery with me, as well as my dog Zoe. I was pulling the wagon with the toddlers and the other kids, and Zoe were walking alongside me. A homeless man comes walking towards us and says, "You stole my dog." "That is my dog. Give me the dog." I said, "Excuse me, this is my dog. I've had her for 9 years. He was carrying a walking stick, and he threatened to hit me if I didn't give him my dog. I did not comply, and he began swinging his stick at me as I dodged it and ran from him. He was even trying to take Zoe out of my arms. He was very aggressive and scary. The kids all began to scream and cry. I told the older kids to run and hide. I was running away from this man, pulling my wagon with 2 toddlers and protecting my dog Zoe from getting stolen. There were several witnesses, and I screamed for help. They all called the police, but nobody physically came to help me and the children. I was very disappointed that nobody was brave enough to even come and stand by me and protect us. I was literally yelling at a man to just come and help me, and he said, "I do not know what to do." I was yelling at the people to get the kids, help me, and they all stood away with their cell phones. The 6-year-old boy Angel ran to us and was trying to hit the man and protect us as I instructed him to run and get far away. He was one courageous boy. Luckily, the police came in a timely manner. We are all safe and none of us were harmed. The man was arrested and I will be going to court to testify against him. I do have empathy for the homeless people, but it is ridiculous and unacceptable for us not to feel safe going to a beautiful family park in Trinidad, Colorado. I definitely learned my lesson that I need to have bear mace handy and a better self-defense skills when I take my yoga kids, my daughter, and my dog to the park. And if anyone is in danger, please support your fellow humans. I know Kyle, my dad, my brother, and father-in-law would have protected and tackled a homeless man with a walking stick, harassing and threatening a woman with children. I am grateful to the police who came to our rescue, and I am so proud of the brave kiddos who overcame such a traumatic experience. After we all hugged tightly with tears of gratitude for our safety and well-being, I hope this situation can help make our parks safer in Trinidad, Colorado. I will testify and try to make sure some changes take place in the community. The homeless people have taken over the park. We will be doing our Yoginos class inside until they make it safer. Thank you to all the parents who trust me with their children. I love them so much. This isn't in defense or in support. It's just to make you guys aware because you guys have the power. This could have been a really tragic experience if any of those children had been hit. And so I just want everybody to know, whether it's more patrols or whatever, but do something please, because she's a friend of mine and a yoga teacher, and I just can't imagine her trying to defend 6 children by herself and hold the dog. So you guys just need to know.
Thank you. Okay, we got about 5 minutes before I get to our regular session, so